right? And then here in the case of the euro, the opinions of what the right thing to do is go very much diverge. Right? So the original goal of some of these countries, and I'm partly from Italy, was to tie your hands, right, by the exchange rate, and then thereby force policymakers to reform the economy, become more productive. But that was the idea, right? So that doesn't happen because the political difficulties were too strong. Instead, countries have borrowed at lower rates to solve the problem of the lack of productivity. Right? So the idea is great, right? But it's incredibly hard to push through it. So then the question is, should you be there at all, right? And so now I think that's the crossroad. Are we going to go and make these reforms that we were trying to do, right? Or are we going to drop out, devalue, and be back where we were before, right? You're right that either way has to happen relatively soon, and it would be great if the opportunity was taken to really push on the streets. People decided to go forward, maybe, to reform, become more productive, and be part of a European Union.
And obviously, nobody likes to see anything in the world suffer, so it's not fun to watch any country, particularly since now the entire world's economy is connected. I mean, obviously. Yeah, but I suppose there was a time when you could watch a country struggling and say, well, hey, things are okay here, but everything is so connected. I don't suppose we really have that luxury anymore.
Absolutely.
I had just a few follow-ups. I know that you have a busy day. One, what specific recommendations have you written about that we haven't gone over yet as far as ways that we could potentially stimulate the economy? Do you have any thoughts on that?
So, that's a very difficult question. So my work focuses on what we can do for those who are most affected, remaining those who lose their job, become unemployed, and who start to work in such a depressed economy. And the other people have made very sensible recommendations on trying to stimulate job growth by essentially reducing the cost of job creation, so reducing payroll taxes, for example, or by increasing, consumption, by stimulating the economy. To a certain degree, all of these are worth pursuing, right? The outcome is very uncertain, and there's wide disagreement over the potential magnitude of the effect of these policies. One thing I can say is that it's probably worth pushing deeper onto our knowledge of what training does to workers. So we see these very long-lasting losses in earnings, and the question is, what can we do to help these workers gain again a good living? And trying to make available as much as possible options for retraining, and trying to coaching workers to get the right type of training. This should be an important focus.
So a lot of what you write about is the effects of long-term jobs, is sort of what people can expect. So I guess a reasonable question is, what can we expect as a country and as individuals, people who are struggling right now? What do you think? What does the future hold? What are the stages? What do you believe is coming up?
My crystal ball is a bit broken, but.
I'm sorry, putting you on the spot.
These are important and interesting questions. So I guess there's sort of two angles to that. So where is an economy gravitate? I mean, and nobody knows the answer to the question. Presumably, we have been through other recessions and possibly prolonged recessions, and eventually we're going to go back to sort of a path of sort of extended growth as we were before. How large that is and how long it takes, nobody really knows. At the individual level, past experience suggests that those people who maintain their job will probably, keep doing reasonably well. They won't really be switching jobs or doing large jumps before the economy recovers. But those people they won't sort of feel the adverse few years as much as the people who lost their jobs and who switch jobs in recession or start in recession. I'm trying to say there will be a cohort of workers, right, who in a way will carry that stigma, and we should be doing as much as we can to help these workers to recover and raise the awareness, right, that people who are in a difficult situation are at risk of long-term effects and what we can do to help them.
I think it's seems like, and I'm just paraphrasing, correct me if I'm wrong, the people who are in decent careers right now will basically be stagnant for several years, but it will essentially be a bump in their road professionally. Whereas the people who have lost jobs or who are having trouble getting jobs, it'll be a much longer road for them, is what it sounds like.
Absolutely, and that road will involve some mobility, some compromises, and it's important to get the message out that if you're the longer you can stay in the game, right, can stay active both, I guess, mentally as well as with your energy and your desire to keep moving back, right, the more likely your chances are to finding a good position again, or a place where you're happy. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to have higher income, right, but that recovery process can take some time.
Just to follow through your closing, ask for the closing statement. Has anything about your work suggested that it's good for people to take low-end, potentially menial jobs just for a psychological well-being? Has anything suggested, like, people, for instance, a lot of people who had good-paying jobs 3 years ago, just for the sake of being productive, have taken part-time jobs or low-end jobs and retail-type jobs, just because they like to feel productive? Has anything about your work suggested that's actually good in terms of finding something in the future, or do you find that for people who are struggling to find work right now, they're better off just focusing all their attention on job searching?
This is a question we very often get, and it's a difficult question. So far, there's no evidence that sort of starting off with a low-wage job seems to hurt you, right? Although there's no evidence that it is very beneficial either, right? But we do know that we're in the middle of finding out that spending some time in unemployment, so waiting too long, seems to hurt you, right? So employers seem to put a negative stigma to it. So having and you may have lost some of your skills in the meantime. So staying in the game and getting a job may prevent you from ending up sort of in the pool of the long-term unemployed. Yeah. So that's, I think, the only thing we can say.
So just one final follow-up. If you had it, so there are some of the people who watch it, and probably many, will fall into the group that you're talking about. The people who have sort of been out of work, have been unable to find work, and to feel that there is a stigma attached to their name, not their name individually, but just their group, because they're the sort of people who've fallen by the wayside. Is there anything that you've written about or in your work that you can talk to about briefly that we haven't talked about yet? Any further steps of action they can take outside of extending unemployment insurance and job retraining? Is there anything individually that we can say to reassure them, or that we can do to help benefit them in the future?
It's a very tough question. I guess there are resources out there for people. So, for example, the one-stop centers that the Department of Labor helps maintain at the local level provide a range of resources. And I guess
they're called one-stop centers.
They're called one-stop centers, and they provide something that the economists call job search assistance, right? So that's where you go to get the listings, right? But you can also get training to get a resume written. You can get training of how to do a job interview, right? And essentially, it's a good idea to take those resources, but also to add on to that, right? To make this a sort of a moment of professional growth in some sense, even though you're not working, right? And to go beyond the services offered there, to try to make the best out of that situation, get informed about what type of jobs are available, what is the typical reemployment wage, right? So realign expectations, right, with what's out there in the market, and I think that will prevent some people from waiting too long, and rather get that job and grow back within the job and while working.
Well, thank you so much for the time. Before we go, is there anything else you'd like to say in closing, or anything else that you'd like to touch on that we haven't spoken about for this closing?
Well, what I'd like to say is that our work finds that job displacement does have very long-term consequences on earnings. It also has consequences on health outcomes. In the short and long run, it affects people's children. So it can be a devastating event. But it's important to keep in mind that in a way, all of our results are based on averages, right? And so every individual has the opportunity, right, to try to really push hard against and make make a difference and get out of these long-run negative patterns. And we have discussed some of the opportunities people have.
Well, thank you so much for the time. We realize that December is one of your busiest months. We appreciate you taking a few moments of your time to speak with us.
Oh, thank you. This is important stuff. I'd love to talk about it.
Thank you, sir. You have a good